Hold your hand in front of your face and look at it for a moment. Every atom in that hand, the carbon in your skin, the iron in your blood, the calcium locking your finger bones together, was manufactured inside a dying star billions of years before there was an Earth to stand on. That is the plain answer to the title. The atoms in your body were never yours. They were on loan the whole time, forged in furnaces you will never see, and they are already leaving. But here is where the easy version falls apart, because "you're made of stardust" is a greeting card line, and it hides the far stranger fact. You are not keeping these atoms even now. 98% of them will be gone within a year, swapped out for new ones, and the thing you call you survives the exchange anyway. So what exactly is it that persists, if the material doesn't? Let me put a number on the loan. A single hydrogen atom in the water of your eye is roughly 13.8 billion years old. It condensed out of the cooling universe about 380,000 years after the Big Bang, and it has been drifting through gas clouds, comets, oceans, and other bodies ever since. It is older than every star that has ever existed. The carbon in that same eye is younger, but only relatively. It was cooked inside a star that lived and died before the sun ignited 4.6 billion years ago. You are, physically, a temporary arrangement of some of the oldest objects in existence. Why should a carbon atom be so much younger than a hydrogen atom sitting 1 millimeter away? Because the universe only knew how to make the light stuff at first. In those first few minutes, everything was too hot and too fast for anything but hydrogen, helium, and a trace of lithium to form. The periodic table stopped at element 3. Everything heavier had to wait for stars. And that waiting is the first physical model I want you to hold, because it explains almost everything about what you're made of. Picture a star as a furnace with a fixed budget of fuel and gravity pressing in on it constantly, trying to crush it. The star fights back by fusing light atoms into heavier ones, and every fusion releases energy that pushes outward against the crush. Hydrogen fuses into helium. When the hydrogen runs low, the core contracts, heats, and starts fusing helium into carbon. That carbon, the backbone of every protein in your body, is made in the core of an aging star running out of its first fuel. Then oxygen. Then, in the biggest stars, neon, magnesium, silicon, right up the ladder to iron. And at iron, the furnace stops cold. Why does it stop at iron, of all elements? Because iron is the bottom of the well. Up to iron, fusing atoms together releases energy. You get more out than you put in. Past iron, fusion costs energy instead of yielding it. The star's whole strategy has been running on profit, and at iron, the profit hits zero, which raises the harder question the rest of this depends on. If fusion stops paying out at iron, then where did the calcium in your bones, the zinc in your enzymes, the iodine in your thyroid, every element heavier than iron actually come from? Because those exist, they're in you right now, and the star that made carbon could not have made them. Here is the answer. And it's the most valuable thing in this whole picture. The heavy elements were not built during a star's life. They were built during its death, in the fraction of a second when a massive star's core collapses and rebounds as a supernova. And more dramatically still, in the collision of two neutron stars, where the pressure is so extreme that atoms get force-fed neutrons faster than they can decay. The gold in a wedding ring, the platinum in a catalytic converter, the iodine your thyroid needs to make the hormone that sets your metabolic rate, these came from catastrophes. You are assembled partly from the debris of the most violent events physics permits. Now, I want to be straight with you about a number you've probably heard. The line goes that neutron-star collisions produce so much gold that a single merger makes many Earth masses of it, and the internet loves to say each collision forges gold worth more than the entire world economy. The mechanism is real. The 2017 detection of gravitational waves and light from a neutron star merger, catalogued as GW170817, confirmed heavy elements really are minted there. But the tidy dollar figures are storytelling. The measured amount of gold from that event is genuinely enormous, yet the worth more than Earth's economy framing is a retelling that inflated a real observation into a headline. The physics stands. The price tag was decoration. I'd rather you trust the mechanism than the marketing. So the atoms arrive from stars. Fine. But an atom being ancient is not the same as an atom being yours. And this is where most versions of this story quietly stop when the interesting part is just beginning. Because even if the carbon in your hand is billions of years old, you did not have that particular carbon last spring. You will not have it next spring. Your body is not a container holding a fixed set of atoms. It is closer to a standing wave, a shape that persists while the material passing through it is constantly replaced. Let me make that concrete, because standing wave sounds like a metaphor and it is not. Picture a river with a boulder just under the surface. The water heaps up over that boulder into a smooth, curved standing wave, a shape you could photograph, a shape that holds for hours. But no single drop of water stays in that wave for more than an instant. The wave is real. The water is always leaving. Point at the wave and ask, what is it made of? And the honest answer is, whatever water happens to be passing through right now. That is your body. The shape is stable. The atoms are river water. How fast is the water moving through you? Faster than almost anyone believes. In the 1950s, a chemist named Paul Aebersold summarized radioisotope tracer work showing that roughly 98% of the atoms in the human body are replaced within a single year. Your stomach lining replaces itself every few days. The cells lining your gut turn over on the order of a week. Your skin sheds and rebuilds on a scale of weeks. Even bone, the part of you that feels most permanent, the part that outlasts you in the ground, is being demolished and rebuilt constantly by two crews working the same wall. Hold on to those two crews, because it's the model that makes bone make sense. Imagine a brick wall with two teams assigned to it around the clock. One crew, the osteoclasts, walks the wall, pulling out old bricks, dissolving old bone, releasing its calcium back into the blood. The other crew, the osteoblasts, follows behind laying fresh bricks, depositing new bone. When the two crews stay matched, the wall holds its shape while every brick in it gets swapped. This is why the calcium atom in your femur today is very likely not the one that was there 10 years ago, even though the femur looks identical. The wall persists. The bricks are on rotation. Your skeleton is roughly a decade-long project that never finishes and never stops. If you've ever thought of your bones as the fixed frame you hang the rest of yourself on, the one solid thing, sit with that for a second. Even the frame is a flowing process. I'd bet most of you have never once pictured your skeleton as something being actively rebuilt while you sleep, and I'm genuinely curious whether that lands as strange to you as it does to me. So the atoms come and go on every timescale. Days for your gut, weeks for your skin, a decade for your bones. Which forces the question that this whole video was really built to reach. If the material is constantly leaving, what is the actual thing that stays? What is being preserved across the exchange, if not the atoms themselves? The answer is not a substance. It's a pattern. What persists in you is information, the arrangement, the relationships, the sequence. Think of it this way. Your body doesn't store you in specific atoms any more than a song is stored in specific air molecules. When you hear a melody, the air pressure waves that carry it are made of nitrogen and oxygen molecules that scatter and are gone the instant the note ends. The next note uses entirely different molecules. The song is not in the air. The song is the pattern the air is briefly holding. You are the melody. The atoms are the air. If that just reordered something in how you picture yourself, and there's a stranger layer still coming, about where the pattern is stored and how it survives a full material turnover, this is the moment to subscribe, because that part is a few minutes off, and it's the reason I made this in the first place. Here's where the pattern gets physical instead of poetic. The information that specifies you lives in structure, at several scales at once. At the smallest scale, it's the sequence of bases in your DNA, about 3 billion letters, copied into nearly every cell, spelling out which proteins to build. But DNA alone doesn't explain continuity, because DNA gets damaged, repaired, and its atoms swapped like everything else. The deeper storage is relational. Which neuron connects to which? How strongly? In a network of roughly 86 billion neurons, wired by something on the order of 100 trillion synapses. Your memories, your habits, the particular way you think, those aren't written in atoms. They're written in the pattern of connection strengths between cells whose molecules are being replaced underneath the pattern the whole time. Now think about what that means for a memory you've held since childhood. The specific proteins at the synapses encoding that memory have been recycled thousands of times since the day it formed. Not one of the original molecules that first stored it is still there. And yet the memory persists, because when the crew tears out the old protein and lays in a new one, it rebuilds it in the same configuration. The information is copied forward onto fresh material, over and over, like a message rewritten onto new paper every week for 70 years. You remember your 10th birthday using a brain made of atoms that weren't in your head when you were 10. The memory outran its own hardware. There's a real principle from physics sitting under all of this, and it's worth naming precisely rather than gesturing at. In information theory and thermodynamics, there's a deep link between information and physical order. Maintaining a specific, low-probability arrangement of matter against the universe's relentless push toward disorder requires a constant input of energy. Physicists call that push entropy, the tendency of everything to spread out, cool down, and lose its structure. A sandcastle doesn't spontaneously assemble, it slumps. Your body is a sandcastle that refuses to slump, and the only reason it holds its shape is that you pour energy into it every single day, every meal, every breath, to rebuild faster than entropy tears down. Stop eating, stop breathing, and within minutes the pattern loses its power source, and the atoms begin doing what atoms always do left alone. They disperse. The loan gets called in. That reframes eating entirely, if you follow it. You don't eat to gain energy the way a battery gains charge and holds it. You eat because you are leaking structure constantly, and you're buying raw material and power to rebuild the leak. The carbon atoms in your breakfast this morning, in the toast, the egg, the coffee, are being drafted into your tissues right now, and carbon atoms that were part of you a year ago have already been exhaled as carbon dioxide, drifting out through your lungs into the air of the room you're sitting in. You are, at this second, breathing out atoms that used to be you, and breathing in atoms that used to be a tree, a cow, another person who exhaled them across the planet years ago. That last part isn't loose talk. And I want to be careful here because it's the kind of claim that gets exaggerated. There's a well-worn calculation that with each breath you inhale a few molecules that were once in the lungs of any given historical figure you'd care to name. The math relies on atmospheric mixing over centuries, and some generous assumptions, so treat the specific 1 molecule of Caesar's last breath per lungful version as a rough illustration rather than a measurement. But the core is sound, air mixes globally, carbon cycles through living things continuously, and the atoms are genuinely shared across all life and across time. Some physicists find the specific numbers overstated. Almost none dispute the underlying cycling. The truth sits in the mechanism, not the mascot. Follow the carbon out one more step, because this is the loop that closes the whole thing. A carbon atom in your muscle came from your food. Your food, plant or animal, got its carbon from carbon dioxide pulled out of the air by a plant during photosynthesis. That carbon dioxide was exhaled by some other living thing, or released by a volcano, or lifted off an ocean. And the carbon itself, the nucleus, was fused inside a dead star before the sun existed. So the path of one atom now sitting in your bicep runs. Dying star, interstellar dust, young Earth, atmosphere, a leaf, your plate, your blood, your muscle, and soon your breath, back to the atmosphere, on to the next living thing. You are not the end of that path. You're one bend in a river that has been flowing for 13.8 billion years and does not stop at you. If even one link in that chain was new to you, if you'd never traced a single atom from a supernova to your own breath, hit like, because that's the signal that puts this in front of the next person who's only ever heard, "You're made of stardust," and never got the rest of the sentence. Let me stay honest about the edges of this, because there's a temptation to overclaim. Not every atom in you cycles at the same speed, and a few barely cycle at all. The enamel on your teeth is laid down in childhood and largely stays put. The oxygen isotopes locked into your enamel actually record the water you drank as a kid, which is how forensic scientists can sometimes tell where a person grew up from their teeth alone. Some carbon in the lens of your eye and in certain long-lived neurons is remarkably stable across a lifetime. So the 98% replaced each year figure is a whole body average that hides real variation. Most of you flows fast, a little of you barely flows at all. The average is true, and also, taken too literally, misleading. I'd rather you have the texture than the slogan. Here's a recognition beat, something you felt and probably never filed under physics. You look at a photograph of yourself from 20 years ago and you say, without hesitation, that's me. But there is not one atom in your body today that was in that photograph. Not one. The person in that image, and the person looking at it share no material whatsoever, no carbon, no calcium, no iron in common. By every measure a chemist could run, you are a different object, and yet the recognition is instant, and it is not wrong. So what are you pointing at when you point at the photo and say, me? You're pointing at the pattern's continuity, the fact that today's arrangement was copied, step by unbroken step, from that one, with no gap where the information ever fully dropped out. That continuity is the thing, and it's more fragile and more remarkable than the atoms ever were. The atoms are cheap, they're everywhere, the universe is full of them, and yours are interchangeable with anyone's. What's rare is the specific pattern, maintained without interruption, refreshed onto new matter faster than it can decay, for as long as you've been alive. A single molecule of oxygen doesn't know it's part of you. It arrives, plays its role in the pattern for a while, and leaves indifferent. The knowing, the being, was never in the molecule. It was in the arrangement the molecules kept passing through. Which leaves one question I can't fully answer, and I don't think physics can either, at least not yet. If you are a pattern rather than a substance, a melody played on borrowed atoms, refreshed continuously onto new material, then the boundary between you and not you is not a wall, it's a rate. You are the region of the universe where atoms are being organized into your particular shape faster than they're leaving it. When that rate reverses at the end of a life, the atoms don't vanish. They keep going. Every one of them returns to the same cycle it was on before you borrowed it. Into soil, into air, into a plant, into another body, into the shared stock of matter that has been passed hand to hand since the first stars died. Nothing is created. Nothing is destroyed. Something is only, for a while, arranged. So the next time someone tells you that you're made of stardust, you can tell them the harder half. Yes, and you never owned a single grain of it. It was always moving through you on its way somewhere else, and the only thing that was ever truly yours was the shape you made while it passed. Share this with the one person you know who thinks of themselves as a fixed thing standing still in the world, because they aren't, and it's stranger and better than that. You are not the atoms. You are what the atoms are doing while they're here.